My name is Nick, this is Crime Dog, roll the intro. Patricia Bouchon lives in the south of France, close to Toulouse, with her husband Christian. They moved out from Paris 3 years ago and enjoy a stress-free life in the sun. She is a secretary in a lawyer's office and he works for a large supermarket chain. Every morning before going to work, Patricia goes out for a run. She is an early bird, usually leaving the house at around 4:15 a.m. She often does a circuit which leads her to the next village, Fronton, approximately 7 kilometers away. Valentine's Day doesn't change her routine one bit. She puts her trainers on and she heads out onto the road. When Christian wakes up at 5:45 a.m, he realizes that Patricia's not back yet. She's been gone an hour and a half, way longer than usual. He's supposed to be catching a flight that morning, so he nervously carries on packing his case, while listening out for any sign that his wife has returned. He's getting worried though. Where is Patricia? She's the most organised and punctual person that he knows, and there's no way for him to contact her. She left her phone at the house. Plus it's still dark out, the rain's coming down pretty hard and it's freezing cold. An hour later she's still not back. All ideas of catching that flight are put to one side. He needs to find out where she is, so he gets in his car and goes to look for her. He knows the route she usually takes, firstly making her way through the old town of Boulogne before heading out the other side and following the road which leads to the next village. He goes back and forth along the route for about an hour, but there is no sign. His stress levels are at a 9 or a 10 when he finally calls the police. They can hear the fear in his voice, and they send out a patrol car straight away. Christian fills them in on Patricia's usual route and they start their search, stopping motorists asking if anyone's seen her. He also tells them she suffers from tendinitis, so maybe she'd been injured somewhere and was stranded at the side of the road. A few hours go by, Patricia has vanished. Officers head back to the station to regroup and come up with a game plan. Given her obsession with being on time, it's highly unlikely she went somewhere of her own accord. An accident seems the most likely scenario. She was running on dark, foggy, icy country roads. She could have been the victim of a hit and run, or maybe she was struck by a car and taken to a local hospital. They check it out, no such luck. More experienced detectives take over the case, aware now that they must be dealing with a criminal act. They interview close friends and family. She'd been with Christian for over 40 years. A solid, happy relationship by all accounts. They also have a daughter together, Caroline. They do find out that Patricia suffers from OCD, which could lead to high anxiety. It's the reason she has this military-style precision and goes running so early in the morning. If her routine was disturbed in some way, she could become unstable. Investigators are also concerned that this schedule could make her easy prey for a potential predator, able to watch her days on end and know exactly where she would be and at what time. They deploy helicopters and put as many officers as they can on the ground to join the search. Eventually, this pays off. An elderly couple from the neighbouring village show up at the station. Their home lies close to the main road linking the two villages, the road Patricia would take every morning. Their statement is chilling. That morning, they claim to have heard a woman screaming, sometime between 4:30 and 4:45 a.m. followed by a man's voice who repeated 6 times, "Excuse-moi." 15 to 20 minutes later, they heard the sound of a car starting and then driving off. Officers head immediately to the area in question to check it out. The couple believed the cries to be coming from a small side street close to their home. They comb the street looking for any clues, any sign of a struggle, and they find something. On the ground are a hairband, a nose piercing, and an earring. More concerning, further down the street, they discover tufts of hair and blood. A decent amount of blood spread over several meters. They present the items to Christian, who is horrified. They belong to his wife. It gets worse. When they check the blood, it's a match for Patricia Bouchon. They need to find her, and quickly. She is out there somewhere. Close by, they find a distinct tire track. Could she have been attacked and bundled into the back of a vehicle, then taken to a more discreet location? They bring the husband in for questioning. His job takes him away from home, especially during the week. But by the end of the interview, the only certainty they have is that he loves his wife and he wants her back. However, at this point, he is their only potential suspect. They do put him under surveillance, but nothing of any significance pops up. They also check the tyre marks against his car to be sure, and as they thought, there's no match. As the inquiry falters, the story hits the papers, police desperately hoping it would stir someone's memory. A week goes by with no breakthrough, but then another lead. A man walks into the station. He's a local delivery driver. He states he saw Patricia running on the morning she went missing, but there's more. He also claims that just after seeing Patricia, he narrowly avoided a collision with a car parked at the side of the road with its lights off, facing in the wrong direction. He says there was a man inside, between 30 and 50 years old, average height, wearing a black beanie. After having made eye contact with the individual, the suspect drove off. He reckons the vehicle was an old Renault Clio. He gives them enough information for police to draw a sketch of the potential suspect, which they release to the press. Trouble is, the incident took place around 4:30 in the morning. Most people were asleep at that time. They take the sketch to local street cleaners who would have been starting their shift around then, but no one recognizes him. However, the visit wasn't completely fruitless. One of the street cleaners spikes their curiosity. It's a young man still living with his parents in Boulogne, and he knows Patricia. He seems nervous, and when they ask him where he was that morning, he can't give them a solid alibi, so they bring him in for questioning. Put under a bit of pressure, they discover he is a collector of ladies' underwear, pants and such that he finds in bins. Creepy, most definitely. A ruthless predator, maybe. When pressed on his alibi, he claims that he was going through the bins looking for more underwear to add to his sordid collection. They obtain a warrant to search his home, and it's not looking good for the young perv. They find newspaper cuttings, specifically articles discussing Patricia's disappearance. He also owns an old Renault Clio. This guy becomes suspect number one. They locate his car, but it's out of order, completely undrivable, and has been for some time. On the morning Patricia went missing, it was immobilized far away from the scene. Unfortunately for detectives, every other car in France is a Renault Clio. There were 60,000 of the supposed model registered in that department alone. It's a blow for detectives. This young man fits the profile perfectly, but it looks like he's not our guy. They extend the search zone and they bring in reinforcements. Patricia has now been missing for a month and a half. A local hunter calls the station. He explains he was 12 kilometers from Boulogne, searching for one of his dogs who'd lost his way. At one point he was crossing a small bridge when he spotted something in the water. He bent down to take a closer look. It's at that point that he realized he was looking at a lifeless human body. Forensics arrive on the scene and discover a female corpse, face down, partially lying in water. Her tracksuit bottoms have been lowered and her top half has been lifted up, leaving her half naked. The activewear leaves them to believe they are definitely looking at Patricia. A distraught Christian is driven to the scene and confirms their worst fears. She has been violently assaulted. Multiple fractures cover her body, including her skull, her nose, and her vertebrae. There are also signs of strangulation around her neck. Despite the decomposition, they managed to lift 2 male DNAs from the body. Partial, unfortunately, so impossible to trace. It seems clear what happened here. She heads out to run her usual route, passes the Clio parked at the side of the road with its lights off. The driver then exits the car and attacks Patricia in the side street where the neighbours hear her scream. He tries to assault her, but she fights back. The aggressor strikes her in an attempt to regain control and kills her. He then places her in his car and drives her to a more quiet spot where he disposes of the body. The autopsy confirms death by strangulation, but no sexual assault took place. They also find a latex glove in her throat, like the kind you'd find at a petrol station. Worn by the killer perhaps, but impossible to lift any prints. They have Patricia's body now, but they aren't really any closer to finding out who killed her. Over the next year, 13 suspects are arrested and released. Police carry out checks on any Clio they set their eyes on. They take DNA. Nothing. Struggling for ideas now, they re-release the sketch to the national press. And this time, they get a hit. A woman enters the station. She claims to know someone who bears a striking resemblance to the composite. She tells officers his name is Laurent Dejean. Dijon had already been questioned at the time, but nothing aroused suspicions. He's a single 35-year-old known to suffer from paranoid schizophrenia. He hears voices and tries to shut them up by taking drugs. He was known to drive a Clio and apparently got rid of it a few days after Patricia's disappearance. When they bring him in for questioning, he denies having anything to do with the murder and also insists he never owned a Clio. They fancy this guy as the killer though, so they pursue their inquiry. And it pays off as numerous witnesses, including Dijon's sister, attest that he did own a Clio at the time of the crime. And he apparently stopped all drug taking just after her disappearance. He was also spotted in the alley where the blood was found that same night. It turns out he also knows the area where Patricia's body was disposed of. He had worked just around the corner for a local farmer. Following her disappearance, Dijon went to see a psychiatrist in Toulouse who prescribed him some heavy-duty meds. Then he was placed in a psych hospital. Given his current mental state, he is difficult to question, often incoherent and making little sense. They think they have their guy, but without any formal proof, they are obliged to release him. They interview him again 4 months later, but same result. Muddled ramblings and no real progress. In June 2014, the truck driver who almost crashed into the Clio is summoned to the station to formally ID Dijon as the man sat behind the wheel of that car. He is presented with 12 portraits, one of them being Laurent Dijon. This backfires on a colossal level as the driver fails to identify him. His DNA doesn't match with the 2 samples found on Patricia either. Frustrated and out of options, detectives now feel their work here is done. They have explored every avenue. They have interviewed every man and his dog in town. It's up to the district attorney now to decide with the meagre evidence they possess whether any charges will be laid against Laurent Dijon. Despite very little concrete proof tying Dijon to the murder of Patricia, they are convinced a fatal meeting took place between the two that Valentine's Day morning. Therefore, Dijon is charged with voluntary homicide. 3 years later, the trial begins. Defense lawyers make a very valid point. Patricia was viciously attacked, requiring strong physical contact. However, Dijon's DNA is not there. Another unidentified male DNA is. Where is the actual proof? When put on the stand, Dijon is sluggish given the medication he is on. He admits for the first time that he did own a Renault Clio, but he got rid of it out of fear of being arrested. The car wasn't properly registered in his name, and there were several mechanical issues with it, making it illegal to drive. Despite failing to prove anything really beyond a reasonable doubt, on the 14th of March 2019, Dijon is found guilty and sentenced to 20 years. In spite of the guilty verdict, this case leaves a lot of unanswered questions. Who does the unidentified male DNA found on Patricia's body belong to? And what happened to the Clio? It can't have just disappeared into thin air. Surely if they could track down the vehicle, they may be able to get a definitive answer. Suspects were thin on the ground, so it could simply just be a case of Laurent Dijon being an easy target. A schizophrenic lashing out in a moment of madness and taking an innocent life. Let me know in the comments what you think. Has a troubled man been wrongly convicted? Or do you believe Laurent Dijon assaulted and murdered poor Patricia in that dark alley? If you enjoyed this video, why not give it a thumbs up and what the hell go crazy and subscribe if you like. We release new stories every week, so hit the notification bell also, that way you'll never miss out. If you're in the mood for more mystery, check out this next case by yours truly. Until next time, stay safe and look after yourselves.